You ever get that feeling? Like something's watching you, but no one's there? Yeah, me too. Except for Gus, that feeling wasn't just paranoia. It was his nightly companion. Gus wasn't the type of guy to spook easy. 43, ex-military chain smoker and built like a damn bulldozer. Now he's working security at a rundown dock. Night shift. Quiet. No one really around and no one really expected to be. And it suited Gus fine. The paycheck came, the hours passed, and the only thing he had to deal with was the cold ocean breeze rolling in from the water. At least, that's what he told himself. This night, though, felt different. The moon was a sickly, pale sliver barely shining through the fog that curled around the pier like it had a mind of its own. The air was still, too still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And Gus couldn't shake the itch creeping up his spine. He lit another cigarette, hands shaking just a little as he flicked the lighter. "Goddamn fog," he muttered, the words hanging in the air before the mist swallowed them whole. But deep down, Gus knew it wasn't the fog bothering him. It was the pier itself. The place had a past, a dark one. People went missing here, always after midnight, always without a trace. The dock creaked under his boots as he walked the perimeter. The place was a mess of old crates, rusting containers, and abandoned fishing boats that looked like they'd seen better days. Hell, maybe even better decades. The ocean lapped quietly at the pylons, the sound almost hypnotic. But beneath it, there was something else. A low, rhythmic thud like a heartbeat. Gus stopped, squinting into the fog. "Who's out there?" he called, his voice rougher than he expected. No answer, of course. Just the fog swirling thick and silent. He wasn't crazy. He knew he heard something. He stood still, straining his ears, trying to catch it again. Thud, 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 thud. There it was. "Shit," Gus whispered, flicking the cigarette into the water. His boots echoed against the worn wooden planks as he moved toward the sound. It wasn't far, just past the storage units near the end of the pier. The fog was thicker here, almost suffocating. The ocean smell turned sour, like rotting fish mixed with something worse. Something metallic. Blood, maybe. His flashlight cut through the mist, the beam weak and flickering. His breath fogged up in front of him, the cold biting deep into his bones. He wished he had his jacket, but it was back in the guard shack, and no way in hell was he turning back now. Thud, thud, closer now. Gus froze. His skin crawled, goosebumps prickling up his arms. Something was moving in the fog, just beyond his flashlight's reach. A shadow. No, not just one, more than that. He squinted, trying to make sense of it. A person? "Hey!" Gus shouted. "You can't be here!" The shadow stopped, then twitched. It wasn't a person. No way. It was taller and thinner. Too thin. Like a scarecrow, but worse. Its limbs were all wrong. Too long, bending at angles that made his stomach twist. What the f... It lunged. Gus barely had time to react, stumbling back, the flashlight falling from his grip and clattering to the ground. The thing moved fast, too fast, its long fingers or claws or whatever the hell they were slicing through the air where his chest had been a second ago. Gus fell hard on his back, scrambling to get to his feet. He kicked the flashlight toward it, the beam illuminating the thing for just a second. That was all he needed. A face. No, not a face. Something wearing a face. Like it had been stitched together from different pieces. Eyes too wide, a grin too wide, and its skin, it was wet, shiny, like it had just crawled out of the ocean. Gus pushed himself up, adrenaline pumping through him. "Fuck this," he muttered, and bolted back down the pier. The pier felt endless, each step harder than the last, like he was running through quicksand. His breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning from the cold air and the panic squeezing his chest. The pounding of his boots was matched by that same thudding sound. but now it was faster, louder, like it was inside his head. He reached the end of the dock and skidded to a stop. The water stretched out in front of him, black as oil, shimmering under the weak moonlight. His mind raced, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere but into the freezing abyss below. Behind him, the thing was coming. He could hear it, wet footsteps dragging along the wood, closer and closer. Gus spun around, fists clenched. If he was going down, he was taking that freak with him. But the dock was empty. The fog had cleared just enough for him to see that the thing, whatever it was gone, or hiding, waiting. The silence was worse than the noise. Thud, thud. There it was again, that awful, relentless heartbeat. Gus looked down. The sound wasn't coming from the thing. It was coming from the water, from below. Slowly, Gus approached the edge of the dock, peering into the inky blackness. Something was moving down there, something huge. The water rippled, dark shapes swirling just beneath the surface. They were circling. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, barely able to hear his own voice over the pounding in his ears. His heart raced, but deep inside something told him to stay, to watch. One of the shapes surfaced. It was a body, bloated, waterlogged, but familiar. Gus staggered back, bile rising in his throat. It was him, the body floating in the water. It was him, pale, dead, eyes wide open, staring straight up at him. And then it spoke. "You're next." Gus didn't scream. He couldn't. The words froze him in place, his mind spinning, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The thing from before, the stitched-up nightmare, was nowhere to be found. But this was worse. He backed away from the edge, eyes locked on the corpse floating just beneath the surface. It started to sink slowly, like something was pulling it back down into the depths. Gus couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Then, without warning, the dock groaned under his feet, a deep creaking sound that vibrated through his bones. He turned just in time to see the boards buckle, water pouring up through the cracks. The pier was collapsing, falling apart, and whatever was down there, it was coming for him. Gus didn't have a choice. He ran, his legs burning as the dock splintered behind him. The water surged up, tendrils of it reaching, grabbing, like it was alive, hungry for him. He was barely halfway down the pier when the boards gave way beneath him. He hit the water hard, the cold shocking the air from his lungs. For a second he flailed, the icy waves pulling him down, but then he kicked, fought his way to the surface. His head broke the water, gasping for air, but the thing was there. It wasn't just one anymore. There were dozens, hundreds, all around him, their stitched-up faces, their too wide grins staring at him from the waves. And then they pulled him under. The last thing Gus saw before the black water swallowed him whole was his own face, grinning back at him from the depths.